But today, being Indian is crucially and fundamentally the absolute ignorance about Indianness, about Indian culture. That is the problem that we Indians face. Okay? No democracy is happy. They're disintegrating. No state is happy. They're disintegrating, whereas India tried to create stable, ordered societies. That is what Indian politics was about. Indians are not against order at all.
That's true.
Our notion of dharma, in a minimal sense, is order and structure and pattern. That's what dharma means, minimally.
Right.
Now, all kinds of modifications and additions to that. So living according to dharma is living in an order, formulated. Are there methodological rules possible? Could we follow certain methodological rules in understanding Indian text? Question. And has Balu been able to identify it? Answer to both is unqualified yes. Take your experience seriously, meaning don't deny, don't disparage it, don't ridicule it by saying it's not modern, it's not sophisticated, it's not scientific, it's not. Forget all that. First, take it seriously. You intuitively feel something is wrong. Figure out what it is. Maybe what you intuitively feel as wrong itself could be wrong. Namely, this servility, unknown, ruling man over man, unknown. Indians is not simply unknown. Indians theorized in different ways in the last, before the 1,000 years, for more than 1,500 years. We did it. The texts are there. But the problem is this, we can't access them. Why? Because the framework within which we read those texts are the framework of the last 1,200 years, especially the last few hundred years, that is social sciences, so-called, that are simply secularist theologies.
Hello and welcome to Mimamsa Foundation for Indic Studies 5th Foundation Day lecture. Mimamsa Foundation for Indic Studies is a research forum which was established 5 years back with the purpose to develop ways, methodologies, perspectives and approaches to study India in an authentic, rigorous and objective Indian way. Today we are happy to have worked on this for last 5 years, and today we are also happy that our community is building, our community is expanding, and we have expanded our activities and avenues through which we study India. We have also developed various avenues through which we can popularize our research, our ways and our approaches to a larger audience. And we do this primarily through well-researched articles which you can see on our website, our research works, our research projects. We also engage with undergraduate and postgraduate students through our study circles. We have online and offline workshops and courses, and these are various ways through which we want to popularize or we want to take our study, our research to a larger audience. We have also constituted Justice Ranade Memorial Lecture, which is delivered on 16th of January each year. And today we are here for the Mimamsa Foundation for Indic Studies 5th Foundation Day lecture. And to deliver that lecture, we are privileged to have with us Shri S.N. Balagangadhar ji. S.N. Balagangadhar is a Professor Emeritus of Ghent University in Belgium and was Director of India Platform and Research of a forum called Comparative Science of Cultures. He is also one of the well-known authors, scholars and writers who has dedicated his life to study and to research about India and come up with ways, methodologies and approaches to study India incorporating native consciousness. He has been extremely critical of the approaches and ideas that have developed on the course of colonization and the way Indians And generally, the post-colonial societies have uncritically accepted those templates to study their own societies. He comes up with a strong emphasis on developing ways through which we can connect to our own experiences and understand our realities through the prism of those experiences. Some of his very well-known works include his a book, Hidden in Blindness, What Does It Mean to Be Indian? Cultures Differ Differently. And apart from this, there are a host of other research works that he has published which provide us a new insight and also an alternative, at times critical way to look at the existing scholarly work and also look at ways or insights that can critically challenge those and develop a framework to create or study India in a more rooted Indian consciousness way. We are privileged to have him to deliver today the 5th Foundation Day lecture, and he will be speaking on a very interesting topic: does India have an Indian political thought? What he's trying to do in today's session is to problematize the way in which we have approached political thinking in the modern context, and how does that, or what does it reflect about the status of social sciences within India. He also would like to problematize the whole idea that we do not have a political thinking. Both of these two are strains of thinking within social sciences, and he wants to sort of provide at least a way out in thinking, or at least a way out in approaching an issue of how to connect to our political thinking and how to go back to our text and read it in a way that could enlighten us, or that could provide a pathway to study India and Indian political thinking. It's a slightly complicated topic and also extremely interesting, and might as well say slightly provocative. But this is the whole point of these Foundation Day lectures, that we expose ourselves to a variety of perspectives which take us closer to our objective of understanding India and probably shake away certain consciousness that may not necessarily emerge out of our own experiences. So with that, I'll now request Shri Balagangadhara ji to deliver his address, deliver his lecture, the 5th Mimamsa Foundation for Indic Studies Foundation Day lecture. Welcome, sir, and first of all, thank you for joining and taking out time and being with us today.
Thank you, Akshay. You have told me that I have about 40 minutes, 45 minutes, and then open up for some kind of Q&A.
Yeah.
So I will try to keep to as strictly as possible to the time. And now, the theme of today is a question whether there is something called the Indian political thought. Now, this question was in a way let's say triggered by a question of 1960s, 70s anthropologist called A.K. Ramanujan in Chicago, who asked the question, is it an Indian way of thinking? Now, at first sight, it looks a very intelligent question to say, all right, of course, Indians have thought about politics, but what exactly is Indian about that thinking? I have discovered that this is not an intelligent question at all, but actually very stupid. Because when you ask this question, the questioner assumes that he or she can discover, when something is presented as an example, can discover the Indianness. I mean to say, as the questioner knows what he or she would be willing to recognize as Indian, and in fact, my research the last 45 years has told me that is the biggest problem we face. Namely, we don't know what it is. When we are given an answer, what is Indian about Indian political thinking, we would not know what is Indian about any answer. There's no answer which is willing to say, ha, that's Indian. because we just don't know it. In other words, a very typical of this question, and that's why the question has been put actually, is to show that, which is what the theme of my today's talk will be, it's to show that we think we know what it is, what Indian is, but today being Indian is crucially and fundamentally the absolute ignorance about Indianness, about Indian culture. That is the problem that we Indians face. I will introduce this to you in terms of politics. And because the time is in 40 minutes, I have to do 45 years of research, so I won't be able to tell you everything that I want to say. But I'll do my best to give you some idea of the extent, the significance, and the importance of the theme. Let me begin with, or as an example, as an illustration. No valid judgments are involved, but what people have been saying, let's say, for the last 10, 15 years. Contrasting two great cultures and civilizations, one is India, the other is China. What have they said and what they continue to say? Well, what is the difference between, there are multiple differences of all kinds, but they talk about one thing which is striking, they say, which is that Indian culture thinks in short term, or Indians think in short term, and the Chinese think in long term. Now, whether it's right or wrong, whether it's correct, leave that aside. This is something which every one of us that I have read, whether from India or from China or from Europe or from the US, this is something they notice. Now, we can also begin with our experiences, at least my experiences, so probably your experience as well. When you look at Indian small-scale industries, small-scale manufacturers, traders of some kind, you find there is an enormous emphasis on short-term profits and benefits. Like I know any number of industries, when they send who sell to other industries, business to business trade, when they send us samples of some product, absolutely excellent samples. Once it's accepted, they start mixing it, literally adulterating, as you call it. Enormous adulteration begins. So sooner or later they find out. The bigger industries, smaller industries are always surprised. How is it possible? I put these bad things in between, so how the hell did they isolate it and so on and so forth? Yeah, they get thrown out, and the reaction is always, don't worry yet, some other bakra will come. So there are bakras in the world. Now, this is something I've heard I don't know how many times. I'm not saying this is characteristic of India or characteristic of Indians, but this is what people are talking about when they speak about focus on short-term interests. Immediate, and when people talk today in India, they want to use American language, make a quick buck. Can you come across with a scheme that allows me to make money quickly? This is what I mean. This is what they talk about. They talk about short term. And you see it manifesting itself, let's say, to 4 macro examples. Consider the trade war that is beginning between China and United States. If you look at it a bit carefully, you discover China has been prepared for this trade war for more than a decade. Actually, America is not prepared. So China has been preparing for it multiple ways, I mean. So even though it was Trump a month or two ago who started the trade war, for more than a decade, China has been ready with it, ready for it. Look for this one. Or look at, for example, developments in artificial intelligence and the kind of engineering in China. Now, again, the plan 2-3 decades ago, officially probably 2.5 decades ago, but before that they started. Today, Chinese patents, Chinese artificial intelligence products, and scientific results top the chart. Bigger than the United States, much, much bigger and bigger than definitely Europe. And again, India is nowhere in the picture. Consider a third one. Number of those who are returning from abroad to their own native country, the Chinese and Indians. The Chinese went about 2 decades ago. Just talk very shortly later what they did. They started attracting, asking them to come back to China, not just capital investment, even though there's a lot of emphasis on that. They gave them the possibilities to build labs. They did. And today, if you look at the research that is going on in China, you see that it would not have been possible if there were not a huge number of foreign trained researchers and scientists in China. And if you look at India, well, I know lots of Indians who came back from the United States and Europe and so on, met with so many problems in India, they've gone back. They don't want to come back to India. Again, China thought why they needed it, because if you want to build scientific infrastructure in the country, research, you have to build a research tradition. And if you begin like where we began, like where China began, without any significant research tradition, and when your children go abroad, your children meaning children of a country or a culture, you have to invite them back and make them want to give when they want to give. Well, China worked on that, and it speak to most people. They don't want to come back to India, and those who leave India today, especially developments in quantum computing, etc., people who go abroad to do PhD, they don't want to come back to India. Not because they dislike India and so forth, but because when they come to India, they do not find any possibility of pursuing long-term research interests. So, if you put it in a more general context, you see, China did something which no other country had done before. Massive espionage, spy work, to get information into China. Now, the problem is it's not sufficient to steal, let's say, or maybe they stole or not. I mean, nevertheless, this kind of espionage, let's say you got information from Intel or from AMD. Now, if you don't have people who can develop it further, yeah, okay, 5 years, 8 years, you might do something, but you cannot develop it further. So China, what it did is combine the two in massive espionage of a type no other country had done before. Until then, espionage was diplomacy and army. Well, China took it at the level of science and nation states. But along with it, what it did was drew in people, sent people abroad, trained them, and gave them incentives to come back. In India, people had incentives to leave the country but not come back. Why? This is what I mean by short term and long term, in the sense that even today, people are looked down because they go abroad, and when they come back, they're made fun of in India, as if they have no role to play in the future of the country. But without such people, India has no future, zero future, negative future. Again, short term. And that you see in all kinds of policies. For instance, what did we do? We wanted engineers. So what did we do? We just built engineering colleges massively, but there were no teachers to teach, which is the case in India. We say, we want to produce world-class engineers. Very true. But you need good teachers to teach. We don't. I have gone, I don't know how many engineering colleges. I mean, it's really pathetic. A huge amount of money is spent. Of course, part of it is to line the pockets of the politicians, but leave it aside. Leave corruption and such things aside. IAS Babus, the same thing. They act as though they know everything when they know absolutely nothing. But they are the leaders, they are the directors, they are the MDs, and so on and so forth. You want today to build artificial intelligence and chip production? We spend peanuts on it, put useless people to head it. $1 billion is supposed to be the budget. People, are you serious? Do you have any idea what it means? Again, no, if you just look at what China does. So, same thing with content computing. Yeah, make some IAs Babu, make some organization, set up some coordination firms within the ministries, spend money, and I suppose it'll also line in the pocket, but you will not get AI. China does DeepSeek. What do? We just look up to some entrepreneur and say, no, you know what? We'll create ornaments around your OpenAI. And this is more or less India. Now, again, you must understand this is not a judgment. This is not value judgment. Because, why is it not that? Before I go, just one more thing. China today, when you listen to the leadership, says, we want to get back to self-respect. For the last 100 years, we have been insulted by the world and we want to come back and be respected. All right? So they plan for it 50 years, 60 years ahead because they want to gain that respect back. If you talk to Indians, especially in the last 25, 20 years, or they already are Vishwagurus. Not that they want to, they are Vishwagurus. They say, yeah, what are you Vishwaguru about? We are the soft power. Yeah, what is the soft power? Well, they have set up center, at least they set up one in Madras. I don't know what the hell happened to it. It was going to investigate, do research in soft power, consisting of tourism, culinary art in India, culinary techniques in India, and so on. So we are going to become Vishwagurus in how we make masala dosa. That is what we want. We think we are Vishwagurus in it. How do you make idli? How? Well, we are the Vishwagurus. Oh, fine. Nothing wrong with it, of course, in making idlis and masala dosas. But point is, China is not thinking about noodles. China is thinking about artificial intelligence, quantum computing, and so on, and it is. But remember, we started mid-60s at the same level. Now, why do I talk about this? Because it is something very, very odd, which is, if you look at Indian culture, let's say 1,000 years ago, we always thought in huge temporal terms. Multiple lives, multiple ages, multiple millennia, multiple aeons, multiple yugas. In other words, thinking ahead, looking into the future, was part of our DNA until at least about 1,000 years ago. In fact, if you look at that and compare with Chinese writings of that period, or bit before that, they were nowhere near where we are. We were. So, we lived in the present, and that is true, but this idea of thinking in long term is part of our culture and part of our DNA. At least definitely so if you look at the text, say 1,000 years ago, and all the people, whether you get from the Vedas right up to Jain, Buddhist, or pick any text that talk this way. Our behaviors were that way, our attitudes were that way. So what happened to us then? Where did we lose it? And why? That's a huge question, but I'll be focusing only on politics, as I said. So the question is, it is this short term, long term, that our focus on the short term, not just focused. I mean, we are not bothered either about the short term or the long term. As long as I get money today, I'm quite satisfied. This attitude, which is very un-Indian, but nevertheless is characteristic today to everybody says of India, and the opposite is actually what is Indian, and today it's in China. But this is not simply their experiences. This is how society is running. This is how politics is being done. This is how economics is running, and so on. So science is happening, higher educational institutions, everything is this, which is totally, totally un-Indian. In the sense, it is not part of our culture even today. Nevertheless, that's how we are taught to live. So what happened about it, let's say 1,000 years ago? In this, I want to talk about two aspects. One is, we don't seem to realize that there is a damage that has happened to our culture, and it's distorted. And that is what is being transmitted. That is happening. We don't know that. Not only that, we are so ignorant of what has happened to us. We reproduce the same things. We think we are going forward. We think we are progressing. And basically, we are breaking our culture and society. So there is a jnana, to use our words, which we think is jnana. And this is what we are doing, let's say, for the last at least 100 years or more. Anyway, to come back, what happened 1,000 years ago? How did those events, whatever they happened since then, shape and form what we are doing today, what we are reproducing today? I'll be very, very, very brief. Please forgive me for this, but 1,000 years ago, there's a first event that happened where we were colonized. But it's extraordinary. We were not colonized by a people, we were colonized by a religion. I'll qualify it a little bit later, but that is, Islam colonized us. Not Muslims, Islam. Now, what Islam colonized us? Which Islam colonized us? Well, it is neither the Islam of the Kitab, that heavenly book, or about its narrator, the Prophet Muhammad. This is what is identified, at least designated as Islam. Of course, they didn't colonize. Allah did not colonize us any more than Prophet Muhammad colonized us. Neither is it today. So that Islam that Muhammad talked about and has to do with Allah, obeying Allah as an individual within the family and functioning within it with respect to Allah. But that's not what colonized us. No. What colonized us was a religion, Islam, but it just humanly embodied Islam. Meaning to say, it is neither the book, nor Allah, nor Prophet Muhammad, but it was embodied in social institutions and structures and individuals that colonized us. What's the difference, you may say? Humanly embodied Islam as against. Not the real or true Islam. Islam as a religion means that obedience to the will of Allah, and as Prophet Muhammad narrates the heavenly book. It's not that is the pure Islam and the impure Islam, correct? No. It is one kind of Islam, but came to us is what I would like to call secularized Islam. It's not, but nevertheless a religion. What's the difference? As I said already, a religious Islam, Islam as purely a religion, is about the individual, his relationship to Allah, his relationship to the Prophet and the practices and so on. The other, the secularized Islam, is how religions get embodied or transformed into institutions and carried forward by human beings. Now, what happens because of that? Well, submission to Allah can only take the form of slavery to human masters. Allah's commands can only be human hukums. You know what hukum is? And bowing to Allah's will is nothing other than jihuzur, to the powerful. This is what secularized Islam does. That's the only way it came to India. It's the only Islam we met. Jihuzur to the rulers, obeying the command of the hukums of human beings, and becoming slaves to human masters. This was the Islam that conquered us. It's the only Islam we met and we can meet. So, it's wrong to say Muslims colonized India. They did not. Even that Islam which colonized India is a religion, true, but it's a secularized religion. Now, what was its impact on India? Well, two things I will just simply indicate. One, which to this day continues. What it introduced was servility in social interactions. Meaning, you know what survival is? To act like a slave. You don't have to look further. Look at your daily life. Look at how the peon looks at an officer, how an assistant secretary looks at the chief secretary, how the chief secretary looks at the minister, how the minister relates to the chief minister, how the chief ministers relate to the prime minister. Ji huzur. Look at their body language. Look at how they talk. Look at how we relate to power. We're terrified of the police, of the judge, of the army even, and definitely of the politicians. The power and the money. Well, you're terrified of it. We Indians. This is servility. This is introduced into a cultural psychology. In fact, we all call it differently. As we grow up, Indians have inferiority complex, we say. No, we're talking about servility, actually. That's how Indians are known abroad. I won't mention the names, but if you look at the top, absolute top people, politics, meeting the top people abroad, the whites, you will see this servility. They bend it down, they shake hands like this. But when they stand next to an Asian, Southeast Asian, they stand like kings. Very recent photos, if you look at Indian Express, you'll see that. This servility characterizes Indian cultural psychology. We bow down, we lick up to, and lick the boots off. And this is not again not Indian. I'll tell you why we come to it. This is a cultural psychology. The second, that's because of what Islam did. Namely, I spoke about our obedience, jihuzur, and so on. What did they do? They introduced the rule, not just introduced as though they theoretically introduced, they brought in the rule of man or human being over human beings in politics. This was unknown in India, unthinkable in India. And enforce this man ruling over man through force, violence in the society. That's what secularized Islam did. It was, so this unthinkable, for us it was not thinkable that a king, a ruler, would rule over people. We don't have that notion even in the language. Prajapalana, we say. What is rule? We don't know. Alvike, if you use it, is to do with things. There is nothing in our language which allows us to say human beings can be ruled over human beings. Agnya had nothing to do with human beings. Gods never gave us Agnya. The Agnya had nothing to do with human beings. It's about using his property. But today, Agnya means command. That's all it means. But commanding what? Obedience of command. So Agnya has two dimensions. One is you give command, the second is you obey. But when we talk about it, all we talk about is obedience. You have to obey the law. Who makes the law? Yeah, depending on who is talking. Parliament is a sovereign, people are the sovereign. Whatever you feel like. You don't need to know anything about anything. But hukum dena. That's all. That is politics. And the rest of us, the cattle must simply obey. This idea, completely alien to us, 180 degrees, the opposite, is what Islam brought through violence. So, in this sense, one of the questions that was asked by Indian independence movement when we were colonized by the Muslims, especially it was Gandhi's question: how could they conquer us if we were not weak? It's a sensible question. I understand the question. No, they were not conquered because we were weak, or as today's convention has it, because we are divided by caste, divided by religion, divided by language. Rubbish. Because you just look at the world tells you the opposite story. That's and nothing to do with conquest, and nothing to do with colonialism. Just think of Greek city-state. There were more than 108 city-states, but Greece was never conquered, was it? So anyway, people who talk about unity, one language, one country, one nation, they don't know history and they don't want to know history. But that's not the reason why we were conquered. We were colonized because we confronted something we could not conceptualize, namely, human beings could rule over human beings. Because we were brought up in a culture where even gods, devas, do not rule human beings, let alone human beings. Shiva doesn't rule, Brahma does not rule, Vishnu does not rule, Indra does not rule human beings. No king rules human beings. So human beings cannot be ruled by human beings. I mean, that's what Islam brought in. So, and simply did not bring it in to tell us a story in a classroom. They interfered in daily relationships, daily interactions, breaking down other patterns and practices, or it supported the opposite. And problem is, before we see any culture, when it is destroyed or disintegrated or destroyed like this, with some time it will recover. India would have also recovered, developed its own mechanisms to tackle these issues. Before that, we had the second colonialism, the British colonialism, which did exactly the same thing that Islam did. That's why the British and Muslims were always very cooperative. Even to this day, Europe, for all the Islamophobia, it's the same foundation. But the British were far more sophisticated in some senses. That is, they brought in also their religion, but not as Christianity. They brought in the social sciences, which is secularized Christian theology. Their political theories, their sociological theories, their anthropological theories, they are secularized Christian theology. They're not sciences, but they're brought back in to India. And, of course, apart from violence, there was a seduction of scientific development on the one side, and the theology, secularized theology for social sciences on the other. Indian intellectuals, everybody was sold on that, seduced by that. And what do those theories do in politics? They tell you man does rule over man. Sovereignty is an integral part of politics. If there is no state, there is chaos in society. Society is created by the state. Without a state, there is no civilization possible. And so on, and so on, and so on. These are our political theories. These are our political institutions. We are supposed to obey the law. The Constitution today is divine to us, and we don't know what the hell it means, but nevertheless, it's divine. You cannot criticize the Constitution. You cannot be unconstitutional. You don't know why. Why should you obey the Constitution? Why obey the law? Why obey the Parliament? The story for this is the story of the last 1,000 years of, at least more, bigger, but nevertheless of, in India at least, the story of Islam, the story of Christianity, both in the secularized form, differently from each other. So, the politics we have today, what does this make? What is the problem with this, you may ask? Because it is okay, there's no problem, democracy, people ruling over themselves. But actually, just pause for a second and say people ruling over themselves. Prajaprabhutva, as we call it. Tell me, do you need to rule over yourself if you want to decide? Do you need rules to decide whether you want to drink coffee or tea? You don't know. Why the hell do we need rules to govern ourselves? Why? Who says we need it? Is it the nature of human beings? Well, the nature of human beings, nobody has studied it. Hobbes, Locke, Rousseau, all these brilliant geniuses, if you want to call them mad, they told us in the state of nature, man is brutish, man is uncivilized, man is violent, therefore you need a sovereign and a state. Well, you know what is very strange? We never thought that way in India. We had different stories, multiple stories, but none of them accept that. None of them even think that way. We think society existed before the state. The state should have certain things with respect to society, fulfill the goals of people in society. But today, the story is entirely reversed. People must solve the problems of the state. There is state deficit, but people pay the taxes. There is state security. You just sacrifice the people as cattle. Interstate security will interfere any which way you like, with any software if you like, any surveillance, and all of it, because it's in the name of national security. National means simply so. Human beings, society, exists only to satisfy the demands of the state. That's the story we have today. In India, it is the opposite. The only function of state is to serve the needs of society. So, 180 years. Now, today we live, modern India is reproducing the stories of Christian theology, secularized theology, whether it's Islam or Christianity, and we think it's something wonderful. Well, it could be wonderful for those who live there. I don't think so, because people are not very happy. Okay, no democracy is happy. They're disintegrating. No state is happy. They're disintegrating, whereas India tried to create stable, ordered societies. That is what Indian politics was about. So when today you ask, I'm almost reaching the end of my time. So when today you ask, what is Indian politics? Let me whatever I've told you very vaguely, namely, this servility, unknown, ruling man over man, unknown. Indians is not simply unknown. Indians theorized in different ways in the last, before the 1,000 years, for more than 1,500 years. We did it. The texts are there. But the problem is this, we can't access them. Why? Because the framework within which we read those texts are the framework of the last 1,200 years, especially the last few hundred years, that is social sciences, so-called, that are simply secularist theologies. We have no clue what Agya means except as command. That is totally absent in the Indian text. The word Agya is there, but there's absolutely no way you can understand that Agya as command or obedience. But that's the only way we read it. That's how we comment it. So, the framework, the way we live in India the last 1,000 years, damage which is a result of the damages suffered by culture and society, has become a conceptual frameworks. And is that framework we're using to study Indian texts? Shastra, Dharma Shastra, doesn't matter what you read, you're reproducing basically, not basically, 100%. You're reproducing what Europeans have said. For example, either you go negative route, India's caste system, it has oppressed people. Always was there, Rigveda says it. Whether or not Rigveda says it, whether Brahmins do it, you can't even ask the question because you don't know how to read it, what to read in it. Or you go the other route. No, Varnashrama Dharma was fantastic, caste system, distorted it and so on. Today you must abolish caste system. That's Gandhi's route. Whether you go Ambedkar's route, Gandhi's route. Positive or negative. Whether Vivekananda or somebody else. You can either praise, oh, we have fantastic things in India, but today's modern world has become terrible. Or India was always like that. This is the little route open to us. So-called secularists go one route, that's Nehru and others, make fun of India, Indian culture, Indian tradition. Then you have the BJP, RSS, right wing, IKS, BKS of today, Indian knowledge systems and so on, which simply put positive valuations. And what is it they do? Oh, you know what? In Ramayana, there was astronomy. Yeah, very true. But, Sumerians, Egyptians, Greeks also had astronomy. So what exactly do we want to say from that? That we also had astronomy. All right. We had metallurgy. Oh, yeah. And a lot of cultures, a lot of places 2,000 years ago also were building metals, extracting metals, making. So what big about? Oh, but it's interesting to know. Oh, we had Kerala mathematics. And so on and so on and so on. We have to study Shilpa Sutra today because Sutra means algorithm, and therefore we must build algorithms. Some idiot told this IKs, BKs people the word algorithm exists, Sutra becomes algorithms. So what we need, IKs, BKs, Indian knowledge system, Bharatiya knowledge systems, is to teach them Shilpa Sutra. Tell me, how will that help us in the 21st century? You think can use Kerala mathematics to send satellites to the moon? They did that? No, they didn't. I mean, it's important to know that. How did we develop our mathematics, our languages, our grammar, our metallurgy? Absolutely right, historically. But you can't teach that today as a way of living in the world. Why do they do this? Oh, that's simply European story again. All cultures have had ray of light in them, says Christianity. Oh, you know what? We also had a ray of light. That is your IKS, your BKS, your RSS, your BJP. So, one sees positive, the other is negative, but that is exactly the same story. Let me tell you this. There is nothing Indian about this story. Everything has Western, religious, secularized religions. And that has been our story for the last 1,200 years. So, if you want to develop Indian political thought further, because it exists, first you have to take a break fundamentally with this framework. And talking about coloniality, decoloniality will not solve the problem. Talking about colonial set of mind will not solve the problem. No, because the way we live embodies colonial consciousness today, which is, what does it mean? It merely means we can't access our own experiences except through alien frameworks. That is, We don't know how to live politically unless it is a democracy. This is the colonial consciousness. I don't mean by that meaning an authoritarian or military dictatorship. Please, even that is coming from elsewhere. It doesn't come from us. So we don't know how to rethink politics. But our people have. They spent 1,500, 2,000 years writing about it. So the first thing we have to do, gain access to those texts. Not bullshit, the way Hindu right and the Hindu left is doing it, or Marxist left and colonial left is doing it, or the coloniality, decoloniality, or nationalism. This won't help us. This will simply destroy us further. I have reached my time, end of my time. Akshay? Nobody's yours.
Thank you, sir. I think it was, in a sense, an eye-opening kind of a session insofar as it tries to problematize the existing body of literature or the existing social sciences and the approach that it takes to understand India as well. So we, before our session also, we had circulated a sheet to get certain questions from our viewers, and I just wanted to sort of put those to you to take this conversation forward. But before that, I want to sort of ask this question. You just now said two things which are very pertinent. One is that in Indian political thinking, the society predates state, and the state was probably what we call state the only purpose for that state is to ensure that societal needs are fulfilled. And that's the limited role that is conceived in Indian political thinking. That one, and that is, I think, to a certain extent, that a theme comes up in certain modern political thinkers also. But there is also, okay. Okay, but there is also something which is often talked about, is that the Matsya Nyaya is sometimes sort of equated with state of nature, and creation of the institution of king and the stories that are associated with that is sort of brought, there is some equivalence drawn to the contract theories also. So do you think that equation has any strong relevance?
Let me begin with your second question. Can we see Matsya Nyaya as a way of reconciling with social contract theories? Is it possible that we can construct such an interpretation? Yes, it is possible because people have done it. But does it make sense in the context of Indian cognitive framework? Answer is no. Because, see, Indians talked about Matsya Nyaya explicitly in multiple kinds of texts, from the Jain text to the Dharmashastra text. They say what you need is dandadharas, that is, those who carry danda, to prevent that. They did not say you need to create society for that. They, in order to prevent that, and even there, Matsya Nyaya is merely this. The people who have the power try and dominate the others. There are also reasons why we think that way, whether it is one of the tendencies in human existence. They say such people must be prevented and punished. But that doesn't really give you any kind of state. State in the sense of judiciary, administration, legislation, and so on. That's the early understanding of state that we have today, very seriously speaking, unless you go to kingship and divine rights. So, can you do it? No, this is the problem with Indians. They want to say everything Europe has said, we also had it. Basically saying, look, we were not monkeys. Fine. If that is how you want to defend yourself, that I was not a monkey, my ancestors were not monkeys, fine. But where do you go from there? So, only thing is, see, the question is this. Why is it that if Indians had the social contract 2,000 years ago, why the hell did they not develop it? Why was it left to Hobbes to begin with, and then to Locke, and then to Rousseau, and to the modern icons to do that? What the hell were the Indians doing? Sucking on their thumbs? Because when they had this notion, obviously, there was no notion of state of nature. The state of nature is enlightenment, just pre-enlightenment and enlightenment period.
Right.
So Indians had that 1,700 years ago, they did nothing about it. So once Europeans discovered, you know what, we also had it. This typical Indian pathetic way of talking. Yeah, you can do that. You can say, hey, we also had social contract. Okay, go ahead. What do you get from it? In fact, it had nothing to do with social contract. Society was not a contract at all. Coming back to your first question, therefore, there is not a single political theory in this world in the last 3,000 years in Western political thought which makes living of people as a goal of the state. I would like to know if you know of any, I want references because I've been doing research on it. I tell you the word we use. Prajopaya Jivana Nimittam is a word they use.
Right.
Praja, Upaya, Jivana, Nimitta. What is a Nimitta? The state is the Nimitta, is the reason, is excuse, is used for what? Prajopaya Jivana. For people to live. I don't know a single theory of state or government or emperorship of kingship in the last 3,000 years, beginning with the Greeks, that tells you that people earning the livelihood is the goal of the state. That's not true. Doesn't exist. So when you say there are political theories, I challenge you. No, they don't exist. Because if they did, give the analogy with the word back. If they did, there is no possibility for the laws they are making in the world.
No, true. So what I meant was that we see, not theorists in general, but for instance, Rabindranath Tagore in his Swadeshi Samaj tries to sort of bring back, he's not really theorizing, but says that, for Indians, the society was more important than state.
Exactly. The word you're using, interest. Tell me what is that? You know Indian languages, don't you?
Yeah.
Right. Give me an Indian word, whether it's in Marathi or Hindi or whichever language you speak. Notion of interest. Please translate it.
Swartha.
Swartha.
Not in the, it's not selfish sense, but
Swa means yourself. Artha is what?
Is interest.
Don't say interest. This is what you have to translate. What is Swartha, Parartha? Everybody has Swartha, everybody has Parartha. Parartha means doing something for the others, for the sake of others. My question to you is, what is the word interest? I tell you why it's important. Otherwise, you can't talk of social interest. Otherwise, you can't talk of institutional interest. Otherwise, you can't talk of national interest. In that sense, security interest of the state and so on. Give me what Sanskrit regional language word is for interest, which can be used in these contexts.
Now that I'm thinking, I'm finding it difficult.
Don't try. I know.
Yeah.
Doesn't exist.
Okay.
Does not exist. Why? We don't have the notion of interest.
Right.
Does not. We can always create some words or find some thing. I don't know. Swartha, artha means interest. Yeah. Okay. It's like saying God is Deva. Yeah. Okay. God. That means you don't know what God is. You don't know what Deva is. Simply. This is typical. Find something in our language which nevertheless allows us to say, we also have a notion of interest. We don't. Okay. In fact, when you realize you don't have, the question becomes very intriguing. All right, if we didn't have that, how the hell did we understand human beings in society and politics? That allows us to ask very intriguing, interesting question. We are not pale, erring variants of the Western culture.
let's sort of link to that is something that I've also generally observed some of the scholars talking about that what idea that is generally talked about in the modern sense, which is associated with anarchism, that there is a strong strain of anarchist thought in Indian political thinking, in a sense that a strong skepticism towards the institution of state, and therefore being always cautioning about that, to the extent that we also have if I could say that, instance of regicide in. And so, do you sort of agree with that, that there is a very strong strain of what is today understood as anarchism thought about in ancient political thinking?
No. But I understand why they make the mistake.
Okay.
You see, one aspect of anarchism in its pure form is challenges the state's ability, legitimacy to use violence, and wants to destroy the state violently. Anarchism is that.
Yeah.
So it is not skepticism towards the state. They're hostile to the state.
True.
Any kind of order they consider imposed from above is violence. But the problem is Indians are not against order at all.
That's true.
Our notion of dharma, in a minimal sense, is order and structure and pattern. That's what dharma means, minimally.
Right.
Now, all kinds of modifications and additions to that. So living according to dharma is living in an ordered fashion, in a structured fashion, in a patterned fashion. So anarchy is against any kind of order. It cannot assume, presuppose, require. Order can emerge spontaneously in the world. No, the anarchism doesn't even raise that question. Political anarchy. Right. Yeah. So, can you see anarchism in India? Oh, of course. As I say, you can discover strains of Marxism in India, strains of anarchism, strains of social democracy, strains of original contract, or you have find that some or other religious leader actually anticipated equality of law. I mean, Indians have been doing nothing else except that. Discover everything. Europe has said, you know what, somewhere it is present in India. Okay, fine. There are people who do that, make a good living out of it. And I don't want to deny living to anybody, but that's not how I make my living.
Right. So now that we are on this point, something that you also mentioned, that we have to access the text to build a coherent Indian political thought, which exists. There was one question which had come, and I just want to pose from one of our listeners. And the question was, what methodological challenges arise in retrieving political ideas from the text that were not written as political treatise in the modern sense? So something which may not have been written as a political treatise, what are certain methodologies? Yeah.
Absolutely. See, in that sense, we don't have, we don't have political treatises at all. That word. Right. If you, for example, Arthashastra, you can define it either as science of politics or science of economics. Dharma Shastra also, but dharma and ethics and so on. So if you look at it that way, we don't have political treatises at all. So
right.
That's the first thing. But if you leave that, but your question here, let me go to the most substantial question. I will answer it in a slightly different way. Instead of answering the question, what are the methodologies or what methodological rules, I will, because it takes some time to explain it, let me reformulate the question. Are there methodological rules possible? Could we follow certain methodological rules in understanding Indian text? Question. And has Balu been able to identify it? Answer to both is unqualified yes. Yes, there are methodological rules. Yes, I have identified. That's not complete, but definitely more than what other people have so far done. Yes, there is a methodology or a methodological set of rules about how we access Indian text, how to test what you have accessed is correct or wrong, how to show or think or find out whether existing interpretations are right or wrong. For all these objective methodological rules and criteria do exist, and I have formulated. To go further, I'm sorry, you need a couple of days.
No, I get it. But that is, if we perceive it, that is possible to completely sort of interesting.
Completely, I don't know, Akshay. Definitely, we can break from colonial consciousness.
Right. So, sort of, since you also mentioned about colonial consciousness, I want to sort of take that thread also ahead. Is colonial consciousness, now we talk about the colonialism for at least past 1,000 to 1,200 years. Is that consciousness, do you think sometimes it is also an, I mean, I don't know how to put it, but it's an organic reality that, because of that interaction and some sort of subservience that we had, that became a sort of an organic reality of sorts, and which is why it is also becoming difficult to shake it off. I mean, do you think that that's also the case?
Yes, I will reformulate it this way. When I use the word consciousness there, colonial consciousness, I mean the following. Namely, our own experiences are not accessible to us.
Right.
Except when using the framework which the colonizer has imposed.
Mm-hmm.
So today, for example, we cannot understand anything about, let's say, people oppressing, so to speak, without speaking about the caste oppression or class oppression. We can't. When we speak about intercaste marriages, the very fact that we talk that way as if something positive or negative or should be financed or not financed tells you you're using the framework of Europe. It's Europeans who told us.
Right.
So anything you look, even personal relationships. So when you want to think about it, take for example, you are doing psychology. Now, today's social science, you require psychology, physiology distinction, body, mind distinction. Without it, no, you can't do medicine, you can't do psychology. You need these two. Whether you are dualist or not, that is the foundation, the only foundation. All right. So we talk about the mind. And we give it Indian names, Manashastra, Manapajna, we give doctorates in Manashastra and so on. Fine. No problem. But in our languages, we also use words like manas. We use words like buddhi. We speak about chitta. And in fact, when we talk in our language, in our languages, how we say, my manas is actually troubled today. And somebody says, what you need is chitta shuddhi, even if you don't know what it means. Okay. So you see, your manas is completely screwed up. What little bit of chitta shuddhi, go to, I don't know, Ramakrishna Matta, go do meditation and whatever. It makes sense to us. But, so your manas there, buddhi, just take it, manas, buddhi, chitta, bhavana. So, it's in us. You are speaking about mind. Philosophy of mind, mind and body. This is only mind. Mind we translate as manas. So what does it mean? Buddhi, chitta, etc. in the manas? No. Buddhi is not part of manas, I say. We don't know what it is. But if I ask you, does a dog have manas? They're not very sure. Does it have buddhi? I don't think so, yeah. Chitta? Oh, definitely not. We know, but we can't explain it. In other words, the words we use in our daily languages is in fundamental conflict with the framework we're using in college, in university, in doctorates, and when we do psychological counseling. So, the language we use and the story we learn are at odds with each other. Oppose each other. So you cannot access your experience. So what are you going to use to access your experience? You feel bad that you're not looking after parents. What kind of badness is it? You're not being the proper son. You're not being the right son. Or you insult your teacher. You're worried about Gurukshobha. Even though you don't believe in that shit, you still are afraid. I've done Gurukshobha, maybe I'll get some problems. Murukshva is in Indian culture. Nothing in the Western culture will even allow you to talk in in that form. So you can't access it. This is colonial consciousness. This is
Right.
inability to access our own experiences except through the framework of the colonizer.
Right. So also, this is something which is slightly different, but I think it's an interesting point one of the observer had was that how should scholars navigate between respecting religious text or spiritual context of Indian text and extracting political meaning out of it. So there is some sort of, if I'm understanding the question correctly, there is some sort of reverence to certain text, and therefore whatever those texts say must be taken as it is, as against how to objectively look at or maybe dispassionately look at the text to take whatever is more maybe how do I put it, useful or relevant now. I mean, how does a scholar navigate that?
But you see, there are two threads in it.
Huh.
Again, opposed to each other.
Okay.
One, there is a thread which draws completely from the last 1,200 years story about holy text, religious text, and you must show reverence for the simple reason they are words of God. The Kitab, the heavenly book, is as the way it is in heaven. What Jesus said and what Old Testament says is what God said, and so on and so forth. You can't challenge them, you can't criticize them, you cannot distort them. That is religion. So you show reference. A problem with Indians is they think they also have holy texts. Veda, Upanishad, Gita, they're typical. See, the problem is this. Veda, you know what it means. Veda comes from vid, to know. Veda is called knowledge. There's something very odd. Why the hell did Indians call these texts, maybe they were three, maybe they were four, it doesn't matter to us. Why did they call them knowledge? Why did they not say stotra, kavya? Why did they use word Veda? Now, what exactly is knowledge there? See, Veda Pramana is sensible only because Veda is knowledge. The only Pramana you can have in the world is knowledge.
Right.
If E equals MC squared is knowledge about the cosmos, some part of cosmos, that's the only reference point you have. So Veda Pramana is obvious if Veda is knowledge. All right. But you can also say Veda is holy. Gita also says it. There is no such thing. There is no other thing than knowledge. We have not seen anything like knowledge. But that's yeah, true. But why does that make Veda sacred, like the Bible or the Quran? So this is Indian question. Yeah, knowledge is sacred. Sacred in the sense, or if you like it, Saraswati embodies it. Maybe you look at it that way, maybe you don't. It doesn't matter to us. Knowledge is brilliant, it's beautiful, it's the best we have, we human beings. Yeah, Indians know that way, no problem. Therefore, you would like not to burn text, not to burn knowledge, you're fine. But what does it mean to say you must show respect? If the knowledge, if it is not knowledge, like for example, you read Galileo, you can respect Galileo, but you don't have to accept his equations. Ut is equal to, what is that? AT is equal to ut plus half AT squared of VT squared of V. Velocity is equal to initial velocity multiplied by time multiplied by half of acceleration to square of time. But, yeah, you don't have to accept it. It does not mean you don't respect Galileo. Exactly the same way, you can read any text in Indian traditions, respect them for all like, okay, that is what they thought, that was knowledge. If you are able to develop it, develop it. What prevents you from doing it?
Right.
So the question actually you should ask is this: why are there only 4 Vedas? If Veda is knowledge, why is there only one Brahma Sutra?
Hmm.
Why did not these acharyas, why did they write bhashyas to Brahma Sutra? Why did they not write Brahma Sutra number 1, Brahma Sutra number 2, Brahma Sutra number 3?
Hmm.
Why? I mean, knowledge is eternal. What the hell does it mean?
Hmm. Hmm.
What does it
Hmm.
mean? Knowledge evolves, we say. What does it mean to say knowledge is eternal? Knowledge is always true. Yes, it is true. For example, Balu is always true because it's true. Everywhere else, you will have to say 24th of April at, I don't know, 8:15, 8:45, nearly 8 o'clock, Balu was talking to Akshay. This remains true 3,000 years from now,
Yeah.
30,000 years from now. Yeah, in this sense, knowledge is always true. But doesn't mean anything, does it?
Right.
So, reading Indian text, the problem lies here. You read it as a religious text. You don't know what religion is.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't know what religion is. So how can you show respect to religious text? Is Gita a religious text or is it a secondary school textbook? I think it's a secondary school textbook. Brilliant, but secondary school textbook. You go much further. It tells us where we were at a level of knowledge so many thousands of years ago.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
I call it Panchama Veda. No problem. Let me call it Panchama Veda. Knowledge.
Knowledge. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I have no problem with that.
Hmm.
But is it sacred? Oh, yeah. What do you want? You should do so respect. You mean to say because it was knowledge, it is knowledge, it is Saraswati? I don't mind. You want to do this? Go ahead. You want to do puja? Fine, do it. What's the problem with it?
Hmm.
This is different from the kind of that's a second. There are two threads. Should we look at it as Quran, Testament, Bible, Old and New? Question number one root. And that's what we call sacred text. That's what they say sacred. Vedas and Upanishads are Hindu sacred texts. Without it, they're making fun of us when they say that, because Quran is only one text, Old Testament is only one text, the Gospel is one text. But Indians have Vedas and Upanishads, multiple texts. Now, multiple texts always will mean they contradict each other. Yeah? Sacred text, God cannot contradict himself, can he?
Yeah.
No, they have one text where God does not contradict himself, whereas we asses, the monkeys, have hundreds of texts where God keeps on contradicting himself. He's not really true God. This is what they mean.
Right. Right. Right.
This is what they meant. Indians have many religious and sacred texts. We are thrilled by that. Actually, it is the biggest bloody insult you can think of. But we're thrilled by that because we monkeys don't even know that it is an insult. That's the difference between us and the Chinese today.
So there was one sort of personal question that came. One of our observers was reading about you, and he read that you reconsidered your ideas on Marxism, and there was a time when you were influenced by Marxism, and then you reconsidered. What led you to shift from them? What was that point that you thought
I
you
was
should?
not influenced alone, my friend. I left home, became a revolutionary. I became not Naxalite because we disliked the Naxalites. We hated them. We called them terrorists already then. So I was a Marxist revolutionary. I was a Leninist professional revolutionary. Okay. So I left home and worked as a quarry worker, worked as a coolie. All these things I did to live with the people, organize the people, and so on and so forth. So I was a Marxist. Now, I came to Europe, one of the reasons. Second was I was deeply in love with who would later become my wife. So I chased after her also. That's the second element. Only two elements. I came here because I had problems with Marxism in India. a split of CPI, CPM, CPIM, the entire thing. So, and they didn't know Marx very well, I discovered. Not just me, we were a group of people. So I wanted to solve problems within Marxism. I don't know what the hell is wrong with Marxism. And at that moment, I thought I had to go to the philosophical roots of Marxism. That's Hegel, Fichte, Schelling, Kant, the German idealist tradition, basically. But there were no books in Bangalore where I was living, no libraries where I could read the English translations of these people. And I did not German, and there were no German versions available either. Perhaps in Goethe Institute, but I did not German. So this lady who later became my wife, she said, come to Belgium, you can spend about a year or two, use the libraries here, and then go back to India. So I went there 2 to 3 years. And because I was there, I needed a visa, so I joined the university in philosophy because I was going to do philosophy to get the visa and so on. I did my philosophy there. And then I discovered by deep study of Marx and philosophy that Marx's thought is incoherent and inconsistent. So, yeah, so I had to, by then I had already fallen in love very deeply with my wife, so I didn't know what to do. We decided to live with her, got married and so on later, but fine. So why I moved away from Marxism? Because of Marx. I took him so seriously. I learned to think in a very systematic way by him, through him. I discovered it was an interesting attempt, middle 19th century, but no. So to this day, I think I don't have a love-hate relationship to Marx. No, I have a great admiration for the man. But I'm not a Marxist. I stopped being a Marxist, I don't know what, 45, 50 years ago, yeah. But there is a great impact of Marx and Hegel on me in terms of thinking. You must be scientific. But then I discovered this way of thinking is not because of Marx and Hegel, that comes from a Brahminical background. So, I mean, they're mixed.
Right, sir. So before we sort of part, there's one question that all of us, because at Mimamsa Foundation also, one of our endeavors is to build some ways to understand India in a way that is much more rooted in our consciousness, if we say. So any piece, any word of advice to some of us who are now starting to learn to study India, what would you tell us how to proceed? What is that thing that we should always keep in mind?
What advice you want? I mean, let me give you an advice. I want to give you two things you must not forget.
Right.
One, Indian culture is in your blood.
Right.
That is what your grandparents, your parents, your friends, your circle have transmitted to you. Yes, it is damaged in transmission. Yes, it's a bit distorted. But yes, you're as much an Indian as any other Indian in the world. So there is no special Indianness that you need. You have it already. Firstly, you must not ever forget. Okay, there is no exemplary Indian. Doesn't exist. It's nonsense. You're as exemplary as Balu is, or as bad as Balu is. It doesn't matter how you look at it. Wow. This is very, very important. Why is it important? It's because the second thing. Namely, take your experience seriously. Meaning, don't deny it, don't disparage it, don't ridicule it by saying it's not modern, it's not sophisticated, it's not scientific, it's not. Forget all that. First, take it seriously. You intuitively feel something is wrong. Figure out what it is. Maybe what you intuitively feel as wrong itself could be wrong. That's not a problem. Point is, take your experience extremely seriously.
Right.
If you do these two, you will force your way out of the framework you're trapped. Of course, you will need help. Those who have gone through that route can help you. That is true. But you will be able to break out of it if you take these two things. One, nobody can take away your Indianness. to take your experience seriously. You are a worthy human being, god damn it.
Yeah,
True, true. I'm not joking. This
true,
is my 50 years experience formulated as two simple sentences.
okay.
You're worthy to live. Your way of living is as valuable as any other way of living.
Thank you on that note, sir. It was really pleasure talking to you. I think thank you once again for taking out so much of time and spending it with us. We really, really appreciate, and I'm really thankful for that. And also thank you everyone for joining us today. This is our fifth edition of Mimamsa Foundation for Indic Studies Foundation Day lecture. Uh, Please let us know what you feel about this. Please share your insights, share your own ideas with us. We would love to hear that. Please also follow us on our website. It is www.mfisonline.org. All our work so far is up there. You can view it, read it, and also share what you think about that as well. Please follow our social media handles as well to keep yourself updated. There are a few activities which are planned, and some of them will be lined up and coming up on our website as well. So do follow us on that. Connect with us in any capacity as you can. We understand that this is a mammoth task, and we want every one of us to collectively work towards that. So please feel free to connect with us, to write for us, to volunteer, to collectively work on a particular topic, and we'll find a way to sort of get together on that. But thank you once again for joining, and thank you, sir, once again for being with us today.
My pleasure. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye. Yeah.